Yes. Okay. But in case this doesn't work, I should also record my screen. Yes. I'm gonna put my phone also here. Yeah. So we are ready to go. I'm gonna pull out a little presentation that I created for this discussion. Uh, can you see it? Oh, wait, I'll have to share my screen, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Just give me a second. Are you able to see this?
Yes, and it looks very familiar.
Right. It's interesting that before I started to, plan this meeting, I was doing some research. It was only like 2 days before I did that, I learned about this car brand called Chrysler.
Mhm.
Like this
It
car
did look
is
like
Chrysler.
that.
This car is
Yeah.
by Chrysler, and it was just like a couple days before that I learned about Chrysler. So I was like, okay, everything just connects, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think before this, I would like to also just quickly introduce myself. I'm Harkirat Kaur, and I am from India, New Delhi, and that's where I actually read about you. Uh, and in 2021, October, I moved to Toronto to do my master's in inclusive
Mhm.
design. In my undergrad, I studied fashion design, but after that, in the 4 years, in the 5 years I was working in India, I did some projects with children, and I thought, like, I mean, I was also writing for a newspaper, and I thought it's a big bad world, and I think as adults, we don't know what is our mission as a community or even as an individual. So I think these things we need to figure out in our childhood, and then live a certain life that aligns with what are our goals, or at least have some kind of vision for ourselves as a community. And I mean, Europe is a very interesting place for me, and to come across a school like this was just a beautiful experience. You read this Medium article like no classrooms, and it's like a dream for a child, someone like me who kind of struggled with learning. And this is what I'm passionate about. This is what uh, something that I'm also working on as in my thesis, and I look for a career in this space. So it's very interesting for me to be able to speak to you about it. So because I think I'm going to have a lot of questions, but I will try to focus on the learning space because that's what I'm supposed to discuss in this particular class.
Mhm.
But you know, you're allowed to tell me, discuss anything that you'd like. It doesn't have to be just about learning spaces, because I think whenever we design something as creative, I think that soul, it could be a garment, it could be a phone, it could be a classroom, a curriculum, a pedagogy. I think that soul needs to be intact. It needs to be strong, super solid. And I think it'll reflect, I think that core needs to be solid and it'll reflect in anything you design. So I think Agora gets it right, and it kind of reflects in the learning spaces and the whole environment and the vibe. And I'm sure, I mean, I was reading these articles where things didn't work for certain schools, similar schools, because some the core wasn't taken care of, right? And of course, there were some technical issues as well. But I'm glad it works out. So like, okay, my first, I think in terms of like learning spaces, like the idea of having no classroom is very fascinating. But as inclusive designers, we always struggle with, like, how can a space be relevant for all these different kids who have like different motives to be in a space. So, this little description of the Agora classroom or the school, the overall school, comes, like, this is discussed online very often. Like, it is a combination of a university, a Buddhist monastery, theme park, and marketplace. So how does it happen? And because every child, some days a child just wants it to be a marketplace and teamwork, and every child has a different need. So doesn't it get chaotic? Like, how does it work? Like, I'm curious about it.
So first of all, I have to add something to this because an important fifth element is being like a laboratory. And I like to call it inventor's workspace. That's what kids need, and that's what we all need. So first, you need to think about why do we have schools? That's the main goal. And in my opinion, schools is not to prepare kids for education. School is to prepare kids for the world. Well, I don't get into a lot of office buildings or plumbers workshop areas or malls, which are divided into classrooms. So dividing the world into classrooms or dividing a school into classrooms is not because that is serves the goal. It's because it serves the organizational form in education. And the organizational form in education is has this educational form has its origin in industrial revolution. Because of industrial revolution, we got more people coming towards factories. We wanted to organize that. We wanted to prepare them for that. And the best thing people could come up with at that point was putting them in a classroom. But there is more knowledge at the moment about how learning happens and how you can get kids overexcited for learning even. Um, so if you go and look into that, then you will have to look into the self-determination theory that Ryan and Daisy developed and the research that they've done there. And they say that everybody has a basic psychological need um, to be motivated, to develop themselves, and to feel well. And from there, they say that the biggest element in it comes down to three elements. It comes down to giving people a level of autonomy, giving people a level of relationship with others, and developing their competences. So if you want to educate people, in my opinion, you have to do that in a way that they feel well, because when they feel well, the performance gets higher. Well, think about these old school classrooms with everybody sitting in rows. I heard a big debate today about chickens. Why don't they even do that with chickens anymore in the Netherlands? We want them to be outside, to be moving, not sitting in a box, staying where they are, laying eggs. We don't even want that for our chickens anymore because we know it's not healthy for them. So why should it be healthy for people? To put them in a box, give them a certain position and make them stay there for 6 hours in a row. Well, so for me, the way that we have that people build schools and how they immediately start talking about classrooms, that's that's um, that's institutionalized crap because it doesn't start in a classroom. When we start talking about learning, when you ask your parents, when did you see me learn as a child? They will never tell you, well, in a classroom. They would always say, when you hit your knee to the wall, when you fell down with your bike, when you had 10 marbles and you wanted to change them with other kids, when you wanted to do something with your sister. So they will always be talking about real life experiences. Well, and science has proven that more and more since the Industrial Revolution, that learning doesn't help that learning doesn't come to a maximum in a forced environment like classroom, but in a more open environment where you can have a certain level of autonomy, where you can have a certain level of relationships with others. And because that level is at the correct place, your competences grow. So if you want to design a learning environment, the last thing you should, the last word you should use is classroom. Is that a bit of an answer?
Right. So would you call the physical space like a kind of in flux or like flexible that fits the various needs of kids on different days?
Yeah, well, the thing is that we are looking for names because we want to put them in schedules. And then we want to say, kids, you have to be there in this room with this name at this hour. But I'm a bit anxious about giving everything a name because as soon as people give something a name, they're going to make schedules. But learning is fluid. So yes, there are schools who have an inventor's workspace, who have silent rooms, who have meeting rooms, who have open space rooms, who have cafeteria rooms, who have etc. etc. And that's a big summary of all the things that you can see when you walk through an average city. When you walk through an average city, you see meeting rooms, you see cafeterias, you see shop areas, you see workspace areas. So these are all there. It's a reflection of the world that should be in that building. But I'm always a bit scared to give something a name because before you know it, somebody is telling somebody else how much time he should spend in that one room at what time doing what. Well, I don't know how your days look like at the moment or when you were working, when you are working, but you hate it when I hate it when people tell me exactly what to do at a certain time. And my products aren't of that high of a level when people exactly tell me what to do, because then I'm reproducing what they've told me to do. But well, you've heard a lot of words that should be in a building and names for spaces and for rooms. But what it is about, in my opinion, is it should be a flexible environment for the person. The person itself should be able to be walking around, going to a certain area, depending on its own needs. So, for instance, in the Agora building, we have these small rooms where you can only sit in with like 6 people. Some of my co-workers started to call them meeting rooms. I told them no, but we just give the room a room number. It's in a reservation system, but the one who does the reservation is the one who tells us, I'm reserving it for a meeting. I'm reserving it for because I need silence. The goal should be not pre-designed, but up to the student. So you need these multifunctional areas. What I also see, and what I also really, well, what I definitely not see a lot in schools is an inspirational environment. And that's what absolutely, in my opinion, is necessary. Your school should be an environment in which kids, when they come in, look amazed, feel amazed, and start asking 1,000 questions. Because your school building can be the full curriculum of any education. And I'm really meaning the full curriculum. So if you have a certain space which has a really open structure where you can see cables running and beams and stuff like that, I can even teach you English because of that, because we can wonder about why do we call these cables? Where does this name come from? Okay, now it's going to turn into a history lesson. When did they first call cables cables? Since when do cables exist? What did they do? Oh, it's going to be a physics lesson now. You know. So and that's it should be the perfect museum as well.
This helps me move on to my next thing to discuss. Like, also a space that is framed or is focusing on creating a social learning process. It was very interesting for me to learn that, that parents, kids are also involved, and kids can reach out to them in case they want to learn something. Like I remember reading about a child wanting to learn carpentry because they want to build something. So, like in terms of the curriculum and the whole environment that is created for the children, like why do you think it is important to you know have learning in a community setting, especially in
Well,
the world
we are
today?
prepared. Yeah, it's first of all, I hate the word school, and I hate it for multiple reasons. First of all, my school period was like I hated school when I was in secondary education. So that's one reason. But the other reason is that a lot of people believe, or they don't believe it, but they are institutionalized to think so, that you can only learn something within a school. Well, then I have very bad news, because you're probably going to be 100 years old, and you're only going to spend your first 20 years in a school. So that would mean that you can't learn anything 80 years after that. Most people learn more outside school, or remember more of their learning which happened outside school than inside their school. So for that, even for that, it's very important that you as a school get your outside community in, visually, but also with people, of course. And you allow your kids outside. So because for a very simple reason, we are preparing these kids for the world, not to stay in school, not to become a teacher. We are preparing them to 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 be important for other people in the rest of their careers, in the rest of their lives. And you can be important in many ways. You can be important as a carpenter, you can be important as a mother, you can be important as a friend or as a father, you can be important as a lawyer. So all of these elements should be possible in the school, because that's where we need to give them guidance on.
Also, this whole idea of social isolation through technology. So how does the school work around that?
Yeah, well, first of all, when you walk through Agra school at the moment, after we started this in 2014, 15, and at the moment, every now and then I'm thinking, what are they doing? Are they laptop staring all day? And they are in the building. On the other hand, um, technology is also a great way to connect with people all around the world, like we are doing at the moment. So what we need to educate that's why we don't ban technology from our schools. We welcome technology. We tell our kids, bring your mobile phone, use them. Because only if they use them, we can help them when they use them too much. Because then we can see it, you know. Um, what I also see is that we as grown-ups in education don't we don't have enough knowledge to most of us don't have enough knowledge to properly help these kids to use technology in a way that it helps you to connect with other people. So, for instance, 15 years ago, when somebody would ask me, what do we need to do with computers and technology in education and with the internet? I would tell them the internet is great because all the information you need is on the web. What I'm telling people now is the internet is great because through the web, you can find everybody behind the information. And then you connect with them. And then you can have a personal talk like we are doing at the moment. Because that is the value of that is way higher. And I think this is an example of this because there isn't a lot to read on Agora on the web at the moment. But what's in my mind is way more than what is there to read. So you trace us down and then you connect it. And now we have a great talk. So that's what technology also can do. So, and on the other hand, we should prevent that our students become hermits because they use technology.
But I mean, I haven't really written down this question, but I'm also curious, like, all these interesting things are happening at Agora. when I was, speaking to my roommate, I was telling her about, I have this meeting and I'm gonna talk about this school that I'm super interested in. So one of the things that came up was that uh, when kids go out of Agora, how do they, uh, like deal with university,
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
answer that.
well, there is a Dutch professor who has followed our former students for 2 years after after they graduated, and
What is the
yeah,
name of
well,
the
they're doing
professor
well.
again?
Sorry.
What is the name of the professor again?
Oh, it's Jos Klaassen.
Oh,
But I can write it down later for you if you want.
yeah, that would be nice. Thank you.
Yeah. So, so he has followed them, and the annoying thing was these kids got out of our school during COVID. So a lot of them went to university, but didn't even get the chance to visit the building, and besides that, so some of them stopped with following university in that first year because they said, well, when I'm not allowed to go in, even allowed to go into the building, I'm going to take this middle year and I'm going to uh, take a job, but then after this year I'm going back to university, and that's what most of them did. So what we see at the moment is in the Netherlands, about 35 to 40% of the students who leave secondary education and go into university or well, tertiary education, um, 35 to 40% of them quit within a year. And that's an average in the Netherlands, and it is that high since the year 2000 or something like that. Um, we believe that that has a lot to do with the fact that in Dutch schools, kids get a lot of training to follow their courses, but they don't get a lot of training in what is going to be my purpose in life, where is my future, etc., etc. Um, these figures aren't that high with our students, and I believe that is because they get a lot of chances to discover what do you like, what don't you like, where do you want to go to, where do you want to dig into, etc., etc., before they make choices, career choices. And in most other schools, it's the other way around. You are good at certain topics, that's why you choose them, that's why you do your national exams in them, and then you find an education or a university that suits to that. But with us, it's the other way around. What do you love to do? What are you researching? What do you do? Okay, you've done these challenges, then these courses would fit you to do the national exams. And these career paths belong to that, to your choices. Do you still want to choose this or not? So we spent more time on that. And it's I wouldn't even say more time. I would say this is like the core in our in an Agora system.
But I'm also curious about is like how does this process happen wherein kids decide what their goal would be or what is their purpose of life? Is it just
Mm.
themselves or are there like coaches who, guide them, facilitate, or added more data into their understanding to make the right decision? And how does it happen? Is it like solely an individual choice, or are there factors of, such as what is required in the society, what kind of skills or thought processes?
Well, first of all, we when we started, we were and we are a Dutch public school funded by the government. So we have to live up to Dutch law. So our kids need to come to do the same national exams as any other student in the Netherlands in secondary education. There is almost none private education in the Netherlands. So we have to live up to the same goals, do the same tests with these kids, etc., etc. Um, but what we like to say is that we believe that we as a school have a simple responsibility, and the responsibility is simple, but to execute is something else, of course. We believe that our responsibility is to stretch learners' mindsets and to stretch their worlds, and with that, we believe that we have to do that in two ways. We have to stretch their known world. So, for instance, when a kid comes in and tells me, I want to know everything about skateboards and I want to build one, well, that's the known world, but I'm going to stretch it because I'm going to ask this kid, okay, you can build a skateboard, I will buy you the materials, but how do wheel bearings work? Well, then I'm stretching their known world. And we also believe that we have to run responsibility to get them into the unknown world. So that means that I have to get them, it's my job as a school to get them interested in stuff they never thought they were interested in, or they never even known existed. And so it's not only asking kids, what do you want to make, do, or learn? That's half of the job. The other half of the job is to get them interested in, and confronted with other stuff. Because otherwise, we have the responsibility to stretch their brains, to open up the world for them. And so most of the time when people talk about Agra, or journalists write something about us, they only write something about the first part, giving kids the opportunity to do, and they call it whatever they want. Well, it's not that. Kids can come up with a topic and we help them to get an end result on that topic. But while doing that, we're stretching their minds. We're getting them to know unknown things, to connect with other people. And besides that, we also regularly make sure that they get connected to stories, elements of the world that they weren't thinking about.
I remember like back in my undergrad when I was studying, and we had this drawing class, and I'm not someone who would want to draw just by looking at something. And I had a challenging time with this professor, but then this another professor came in, which I was super comfortable with because he was like, just draw anything. So that was very liberating for me. And then that also enabled me to just have develop my own style of drawing.
Exactly.
And something that I also read while I was researching for Agora schools was, and also in my own studies, we've learned that we are all on the spectrum. We all learn differently. So is it challenging, to enable kids to find their, projects, and like how does it? And I'm sure there are coaches to support them, but I'm sure it's challenging. So would you like to discuss, what are the challenges to make this happen?
It's very challenging. It's So I had this. Let's take get an example out. I had this boy, and this is I was in my second or third year at Agora when we were only with. I was in my second year there, and we were only with five grown-ups and five. So I always say grown-ups because I don't like the word coach or teacher. Or we were there with five grown-ups helping these kids, and one of these kids, well, he was just a very quiet kid, always sitting in a corner with his back to the wall, so nobody could really see what he was doing. He was on a search for safety, and I became his personal coach in the school, and I started talking to him, and I asked him, "What have you done last year at Agora?" And he wasn't really able to say something to show me a great result or whatever. So it was a good example of this kid, which in primary school they told him like 8 years in a row, "You're the stupid one," and 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 because a lot of people told him that, he didn't move. He didn't move anymore. So, but he always 9 out of 10 days he was wearing training suits, from football clubs. And I was asking him, "Why do you wear them? Because I never see you sweating. You're always sitting in a corner. You don't need a training suit. You're never sweating." And that's how I discovered that he was quite an athletic guy. And he immediately after school he would go to fitness or he would go to football or whatever. And we started talking about that. And I told him, "Do you know that there are a lot of jobs in there? You could become a professional fitness instructor or a professional tennis trainer or." And he didn't know that. Well, he knew that there were jobs like that, but he said, "Well, but that's not for me." And I asked him why not. And he said, "Well, I'm lowest level." And I said, what does that mean? And he explained to me that to make the story short, he explained to me that he was like with the he even called it the stupid 10% of the school. And I told him, well, that doesn't matter to me. Do you want to uh, look into these jobs? And he said yes. And I said, well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to call a school which is like 2K away from here, because that's where they train people to become professional trainers, etc., etc. I'm going to call them and I'm going to ask them if you can spend a week there. And he said, you're nuts. They're all 18 and I'm 14 years old. I said, but you're going over because I want you to be in an environment that you truly love. And sitting in this corner, you're miserable. And he was miserable for a year and a half before we came up with this solution. So I got the school to take him in for a week. And on the first Monday evening, he called me and he said, Rob, I'm he was overexcited. And then on Friday, he came back to my school and he came in very sad. And I said, what happened? And he started crying. And he told me that he discovered that they only let kids in who were like average students or higher in the Dutch secondary system. And he said, I'm definitely not average. And I told him, well, who told you that? And he said, well, everybody. And I said, well, okay, but I'm the school lead. So I'm going to tell you, you're average starting today, and we're going to get you into that school within 2 years. And he was like, that's impossible. Well, we did it. And why did we do it? Because he had the motivation to get there. And so we made him shine, you know. I can't get somebody with an IQ of 60 into a lawyer firm within 6 years. But you can definitely raise the bar, and quite a lot, if people are motivated. So that should be the first thing in every school that people should be looking for. How do I get this kid motivated? And what do I need to do for that? Not what does the kid need to do for that. That's very, the students are motivated when they got born. The reason that they are in this the situation where we put them in.
What's also interesting to think about is, like, I was reading about this student in their third year, and they were supposed to go for Dutch swimming championship, which wherein they were supposed to, or like were encouraged to learn about biology or physics or how their food digests and science. How are like teachers, you know, like trained? I don't personally like the word training, but like how
Yeah,
teachers are enabled to, facilitate such learning, because, I think every, like for teachers, they are proficient in like one subject. So how does the training happen? Like, is there like collaboration from
yeah.
different
Well,
methods?
it's a good thing that you swerve back to that because I just finished that story and then I was like, why did I start the story? And I started that story because I wanted to show you that what we are doing is very difficult. Because what we normally do as teachers is tell kids, this is what you need to know, remember it, and if you don't remember it, you haven't listened. What we are doing is we are listening. What do they need? And what do I need to accomplish for that? Well, that is like a 180-degree turn for most teachers. So we are trying to get people to understand that. But on the other hand, I also have to see it. Um, so if we look into Agora at the moment, our teacher training, and I can be quite honest, sucks because um, there is a very strange there was a very strange thing happening around Agora. We started this 2014 2015. In 2017, one of my friends gave me a phone call. He said, Rob, you're starting an Agora in Rotterdam. That's a city in the north. And I said, what? And he sent me a link to a website of an Agora in Rotterdam. And I didn't even know the people. They never visited us. So what happened in the Netherlands was that people were reading about what we were doing and they were starting Agoras themselves. without consulting us, without coming over. So that exploded. So at the moment, there are 20 agoras without a system in place to train them all, just because a lot of people started doing it. So what I'm doing at the moment, and that's why I started my company last summer. I started my company because I have all this knowledge. And in my position at the school, I wasn't able to share all the knowledge. If you would have sent me the same email before the summer, I would have absolutely turned you down because I was the in the school. I did school leadership. So, and then also a lot of people ask us, how do you do it, etc., etc. So what I'm doing at the moment is I'm building a big database together with Agora friends. We're building a big database, and that big database should enable us to train new teachers and to get new staff involved. And so that's what we are doing at the moment, because as you can imagine, that mindset switch is the most difficult thing to train, especially with people who not only have had other training, but who are also institutionalized because they went to school themselves. Yeah. So this is still a big difficult problem. But I can tell you that all the people that enlist in an Agora school to work there, they are willing to change. And that is a big difference with all the other schools I've been working in. Because let's be honest, in most of the schools around the world, 30 to 50% of the employees doesn't even know a reason why they should change.
Sorry, like who doesn't know? The employees
They don't even know a reason why they should change. You know, 30 to 50% of the people who are in education, in my opinion, at the moment, have done this Teachers Academy training when they were like 20 years old or younger, and they just continue doing that for 40 years. They don't want to change anything. So I consider them as very bad actors. They studied one role and they're going to do it 40 years in a row. So I feel lucky with the people who come towards Agoras and enlist to work there because they at least want to change. And when you want to change, you can change, and you open up for everybody who helps you.
And what is the response like from the, like the society at large? I'm sure Dutch society is much more open, but what are your thoughts on like such as North America or India? You think we can replicate or take this forward to other countries?
Yeah. So first of all, it doesn't matter where you go around the world. You always have people who are pro or against, and that's the same in the Netherlands, of course. I believe a lot of people are against because they don't know any better, because they're used to the regular system. They will say stuff like, "But I've turned out perfectly normal as a grown up." Well, okay, then we don't improve anything. Then that's silly. Um, Second, I get questions from all around the world. So from South America, North America, Africa, Australia, Asia. I've only did when I have a look at this year, I've visited Scotland, I've visited Saudi Arabia, sorry, not Saudi Arabia, the Emirates. I've been in Korea. Um, I'm I'm the new thought leader of the Future School Alliance in Australia for this semester. So there is a growing demand around the world from people who absolutely see that we have to change education and it has to go towards this. Um, and that's also the same in the Netherlands. What I also see is that it seems like there are these two sides at the moment, and that's a global problem. So you always have that group of people who wants to keep everything as traditional as possible, and and you have this group of people who it can't be personal enough, you know. And what try to say everybody is that we need both. So please don't pick a side, but try to grow from both sides, and this is what we should aim for.
Do you think it is okay to assume that the regular schools, that are designed to be classrooms and like a replica of a, factory? I think that's
Yeah.
what classrooms are, right?
Yeah.
Do you think like they are absolutely not going to work? Or do you think there is some hope there, or we can take something from that system?
Okay. So there, in my opinion, there is no element in regular education that, if you look at the element, oh, well, let's rephrase. The, all the elements in regular education are useful. The problem with the elements is the way how we organize them. And that starts with putting kids in a classroom, treating kids like batches, like Ken Robinson says. So a batch is a kid, and kids within a batch, so kids within a class, there can be 346 days between them, and they're still in the same batch. And they still have to do everything at the same time. Well, that's silly. But what these educators try to teach them, and how they try to teach them, that's great. I know a lot of great teachers. The problem is that we give them the batch. And as soon as you give them a batch of kids, so, and in that batch, there can be kids who are highly interested for what you want to do. There can be kids who aren't motivated for what you want to do with them at the moment. So these kids have different needs. And if you put them in the same batch, then this great professor or this great English teacher or whatever teacher, they uh, have to get a second job. And that's policing the batch, policing them around, telling them, you be quiet, I'm talking to him. Uh, don't talk that much. We should, you go slower because the other ones can't keep up. Well, that's how we organize it. So I believe in the regular system, we have an organizational problem. The people who work there want to do the best. And I believe, so I don't have any doubts about that. But we have an institutionalized organizational problem. And because of that, um, when we start working on that, we can raise the bar. And that's well, that's what I want to achieve. I want to help other schools to raise the bar. I get a lot of calls and emails about schools, and they tell me we want to become Agra, and I tell them you shouldn't. Let me come over, have a look at your school, have a look at your staff, have a look at where they are at the moment, and let's make a plan together with them, which is feasible for them to make the next step. You know, because we shouldn't forget that all the people who work in education are learners too. If we want them to raise the bar, they have to learn, they have to improve. So we should treat them with the same amount of respect as we want them to teach the student, to treat the students.
Especially in a time like this, when I mean, what immediately comes to my mind is like there are so many jobs that just are like very mechanical. This needs to be done, right?
Yeah.
So how do you come up with individuals who can take up those jobs? But I think even if we are preparing kids to take up those jobs, I think a person who has gone to Agora would be so much more willing to do a lot more even within that small scope of that role or
Yeah.
position, right?
Yeah.
And especially now when there is this whole idea of artificial intelligence, every all the mechanical tasks have been taken care of by the computer. So it's
Yeah.
very important to create these spaces for children or for individuals wherein they can cross question what the computer is doing for them, right?
Yeah, let's talk about Chat GTP, for instance. So Chat GTP for me is a perfect example. It's not about what you know about a topic. It's, are you great at asking very good questions about a topic? If you're great at that, ChatGTP can help you with anything. So it's not about knowing everything about biology. It's about learning you to think like a biologist so you can ask the right question. It's not about knowing everything about English. It's about learning you how to think like somebody who can express himself in English. So, and that's the change that education has to make as well. Because there is so much information in the world, it's not feasible anymore to remember everything. You know, when I look back to my great grandfather, for instance, he lived in a small town here in the 1900s. When they traveled more than 5K, they had a world journey behind them, you know? They were always in the same village. There were not a lot of influence from outside. There was not, and now my daughter, she's at home. The amount of information she gets on a daily basis from TV, from YouTube, from other kids, from everybody who gives them a phone call, etc., etc. That's absolutely not comparable with. I like to believe that the amount of information that she has to cope with in a day is the same amount of information that my grandfather had to cope with in 10 years, 20 years. So, of course, these kids don't listen to everything. Why should they? If they would listen to everything, they had to have hats like this big to remember everything, you know?
I think we certainly need that mindset to really how to process all this information. I think that's what you need at the end of the day.
That's what you need. That's what you need. And first of all, it starts with making sure that people feel happy. It's you've must have seen a video of mine where I'm talking about sponges and putting them into water. Did you see that? Well, it's, did you see the video or not? No? Okay. So for the brain is a very simple instrument, in my opinion. It works the same like a natural sponge. You know, a sponge where you can clean your windows with or whatever. If you have that natural, it's a natural product, the sponge, and it almost looks the same like your brain, you know, with the, if you put a sponge into water, you don't have to do anything. You grab it out there and it has sucked up water. I've never seen anybody pour a bucket into a sponge. That's not necessary. If you put the sponge in the right circumstances, it sucks up water. Well, I believe the same happens with your brain. If you feel happy, if you are looking forward to, well, this talk, for instance, your brain will suck up knowledge. It will. And that's what we need to make sure. That's what we need to train people and learn them. Make sure you're happy. Make sure you know why you are where you are at the moment. Make sure what you want to get out of it. And then your brain will suck up all the knowledge. And that's how you can be a lifelong learner, because it's not about learning in school. It's about preparing you to be a lifelong learner, preparing you to be able to think like an astronaut, to be able to think like a biologist, to be, you know, and I believe that that's what primary and secondary education should be about. And to do that, of course, you need a lot of skills. You need to be able to listen. You need to be able to connect with other people. You've been able to relate to other people. You have to be able to read. You have to be able to do mathematics to a certain level, because otherwise you can't have that talk. So, and then I circle back to where we started. We are back to the self-determination theory again by Daisy and Ryan, because when you want people to be happy and motivated, you always have to look at their level of autonomy, their level of relationship with others, and the level of competence. And so, well, saying this is easy. Doing it is something else.
I mean, you've been working on these projects, working with children and teachers. Like, what is your experience, and what would be the dream for you in this journey?
Well, first of all, my experience is that there are no people who don't want to learn. That's ridiculous. Everybody wants to learn. The problem is that a lot of people don't want to learn what I want to tell them. Then I need to adjust. And then I need to adjust. So then I have to say, okay, I have to look for what does the other person want, and then I have to be very honest. I can deliver this or I can't. If I can't, I'm going to help you to find someone else. That's very important. And so what I'm hoping is that I can help schools and I'm really hoping to be important on a big scale to get people to look at other people like this. So first of all, around learning in schools, but I'm also trying to help organizations to look like from that perspective, not only towards the student, but also towards the employees. You know, because you have to treat them the same if you want them to be like that with kids and etc. etc. And that's one of the reasons why I started my business this summer, because well I was stuck in that school building, and I always, when I started there, I already told them I can't stay here because I whatever I learn here I need to spread that with a bigger community, and that's what I'm doing at the moment. So within the next year you can expect online courses for individuals who want to know more about elements of what I'm talking about. But you can also expect that I have a backbone online for students who want to, for schools who want to go into this direction, not only secondary schools or primary schools, but also higher education and universities. Um, I want to have that online backbone in which all these people can meet each other as well when they've finished a part of that. And next to that, I want to do, and I'm doing consulting at the moment, so visiting schools, helping them to go forward. And I hope to have that online backbone for that as well. So I don't always have to be there because I love to travel, but being away every day is something else. I also have a family. Uh, so I hope by this to spread the word more and more and make it easier for people like you to get information about what wouldn't I don't like the word discover because I don't think it's something new that I've found that I'm talking about. Um, but for some people it is like a discovery because they haven't heard of it before.
It's interesting that you mentioned employees and organizations, because that's also an environment that can use some humility and empathy, and not empathy but just an understanding of individuals.
I've been I've visited schools all around the world, and a lot of the times these school principals, I have to come into their offices, and then they ask me, "So difficult team, what I have here." You know, that's one of the first things a lot of them say is difficult, difficult. Yeah, he doesn't want to learn. And then I ask these managers, "Okay, tell me three things he loves to do," and then they can't answer that. So, well, when you're not interested in the other person, of course you can say that the other person doesn't want to learn anything. And so that's one of the things. The other thing is that what I also see in a lot of schools is that they have these pre-designed things that all the teachers need to do as teacher training. Well, that slows everything down because if I tell all my teachers that they have to, well, for instance, when I started in 2000, in the year 2000, all the Dutch teachers in the school that I was working then had to do a Word, Excel, PowerPoint course, you know, Google Office, of a Microsoft Office course. Well, the only thing that they were talking about in the teachers' lounge was, I don't want to do that. They're forcing me to learn something, etc., etc. So when you have a negative sound going on, then they will definitely not learn anything. The sponge wouldn't be working, would it? So what I always try to do in schools is I try to explain to them that what if we figure out what every individual wants to learn and then make them work together? Because then you can have these great technology people in your and which are going in depth on that. And you can have these great pedagogues who go in depth on that. And then we make them work together. And then we make it's a huge jump that we make then. And everybody is feeling happy and they want to do, they're talking about their learnings and, you know, so, but what I see in practice is that classroom thinking. No, everybody has to learn the same thing on the same day, and then we go and do the next tomorrow. In practice, you put everybody together in the same room, everybody starts complaining about the fact that you put them in, together in one room. That means that even the people who wanted to learn it can't learn it fully, and it's
True.
slow growth. Yeah, so that.
I think there needs a lot of thinking that needs to go into, learning for children. Like, honestly, while I was doing this research, and there's this very beautifully written article on the times.uk, and I think the journalist interviewed you. And on the same website, there was this story about, how the government thinks, or maybe it's in practice already, that kids, the parents will not be given some kind of benefit, monetary benefit, if their
Mhm.
kids don't show up at school. So this is the kind of thinking some governments have, and it just makes me think that, we need to rethink policies, pedagogy, how teachers are trained. And I think something or someone who just needs to be themselves are the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And but I hear that also, like these students don't want to come over. We have to force them. That that doesn't say a lot about the students. It says a lot about the school.
Exactly,
Because
right? Yes.
we I always say at least at school everybody should be able to be happy. At least at school, because we know that a lot of kids are in difficult positions at home. Well, at least at school they should be happy. That should be your first concern.
Right. A lot of work needs to happen.
Yeah, absolutely,
But it
absolutely.
was lovely, lovely speaking to you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I mean, it's always nice to, I mean, of course, I can just do all this research, watch all your interviews, but it's just nice to be in the same time and, I can ask questions. It's just a very different feeling. And uh, I think, like, I was thinking to myself yesterday that I was creating this meal plan for myself, and I mean, it's not always easy to follow it, but because I've created a plan, it's kind of reflected in my real life also. But the fact that I'm speaking to you right now, I don't know if we'll ever talk again, but it'll inspire me and it'll inform my practice also.
Yeah,
So
and the great thing about this for me, because there is a benefit for me as well. um, my English was quite poor like 8 years ago, but because I get requests like from people like you, my English is getting better and better. So, but what I also what my benefit from things like this is also that well, you're asking not exactly the same questions as other people. You know, everybody has like his own perspective, and it's very nice, and it's a good training for me to get to hear all these perspectives and to try to respond to that. So I see it as a personal training.
yes, we should be able to answer all the difficult questions, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, well, I must send a lot of regards to your classmates, and I hope they loved what we have done, and they loved the research that you've done.
Right, absolutely. What I'm going to do is I'm going to post a whole video for them to watch, and I'm going to present like snippets from this interview in the classroom, like
Mhm.
maybe 10 minutes of it or 5 minutes. I think it would be interesting to see some very important points that you've made in the meeting. That would be nice too for them to
Okay.
see again.
Are you sending me that video as well?
Sure, if you want to, sure. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that would be nice. Would be nice.
I can
Okay.
put it on YouTube and I'll share a link with you.
Ah, yeah, that would be great. Thanks for that. Okay. Have a nice day.
You too. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.